Hello everyone and welcome back and happy Halloween to you all. I hope you're all having a great one. I'm not sure when I'll upload this video, but hopefully it'll be up by the time I'm making it because it's right now October 31st. It's Halloween down here. So yeah, this is my Halloween video for this year. Unfortunately, I haven't really had any time to work on a horror film review for you all because well, basically not just work, and general life, but also university. And I think the university portion is definitely the part that held me back from doing a review for you guys because one of our classes happened to go into overtime, so to speak. They gave us, an extension on one of our assignments because we needed it. So basically, that kind of ate into my time, and my assignment was due yesterday. I turned it in the day before, but still, right after I turned it in, I had to go to work, and I was really exhausted yesterday. I needed to sleep in, and then I had to go to work again, and tonight, same thing, I have to go to work. So it's just been grueling, this past few weeks, I should say. But in order to make it up to you all, I have to do something horror related for this Halloween. And for this video, I'm going to be showing you all my entire VHS horror film collection. This isn't going to be a very long video. It's going to be fairly short because I haven't got a lot of these videotapes left. I've just kept these because, well, they've just happened to not be thrown out. And there's a few that I'm very happy to own because some of these tapes have really cool cover art. And one of them is actually a rare, uncut version of a very popular horror movie franchise, and this uncut version has not been released on DVD or Blu-ray to my knowledge. So there's a lot to talk about, and I'm going to start off right now, going through these tapes, and I'm just going to talk about, some of my fondest memories of going through the horror aisles in video stores, as a kid, because when I was about 8 or 9, I used to always sneak into the horror section. Me, my brother, and my dad would always go to the video stores on Friday or Saturday nights and rent a couple of movies. And obviously, I was too young to watch horror. And if I was going to watch horror, it couldn't be anything more than a PG rating. And there weren't a lot of PG horror films, that's for sure. So, yeah, I mean, I'm just going to share some of my fond memories with some of these movies and some of the experiences I had going through the video stores back in those days. So let's begin, shall we? I'll start off with The Howling. This is a slipcase. I always loved these slipcase covers. I thought they were really cool. They definitely took up less space than a lot of those big clamshells. This unfortunately was cut up and I reassembled it. And this is the CEL Starscreen Edition series. CEL used to release a lot of these slipcover movies. I loved how they looked. I just liked the bordering and all that stuff. And they used the poster of the movie. They used to put reviews on the back. And I think CEL/Embassy did the best VHS covers. They were really cool. And here's another one for Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist. Well, it says Steven Spielberg's Poltergeist, but it's actually Tobe Hooper's Poltergeist because he directed it. So, yeah, that's a bit strange, but I guess Steven Spielberg produced it and his name was bigger than Tobe Hooper, so fair enough. And this is a classic movie, and it wasn't one of those movies I grew up watching. Poltergeist I knew of as a kid when I used to see it in the video stores, but I never watched it until much later. And The Howling was a movie my dad introduced me to. He goes, "Oh, it's a great werewolf movie. You'll love it." And yeah, I would say it's a good horror film, a good werewolf film, but I wouldn't say it's my favorite. I do think the wolves in this, though, are the most vicious-looking werewolves I've ever seen. And here I have Return of the Living Dead Part 3. Now, this is on DVD, but I have yet to get it. And this was one of those movies that I always thought was weird because when I watched it, it was so different from the previous two. All the campiness was gone, and there was this kind of depressive kind of attitude with this one. And it was directed by Brian Usna, and it came out in 1993, around the time of the grunge movement. And this movie very much has a lot of that grungy kind of aesthetic. I mean, the chick zombie in this is, of course, sort of gothic and stuff, and You know, there's a lot of really depressive themes. It's kind of like a horror version of Romeo and Juliet almost. In fact, that's what it's being described as. Does it connect to the originals, the first two movies? Somewhat, as far as the story of the chemical that brings the zombies back, but that's about it. It doesn't really have much more. I mean, Tom Matthews and James Karen are not back for this one like they were in the previous two. I would like to have seen them come back, you know, maybe playing serious characters, but that wasn't the case, you know. But yeah, that's Return of the Living Dead 3. It was a strange one. I always thought the cover was pretty generic, though. It looked interesting, but I didn't think it was as cool. I was never fond of these sort of Photoshop style covers, you know. I always preferred the hand-painted poster art. They just looked so much cooler. And here I have A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. This one is interesting because this is the uncut version of part 5. This is the one I was talking about. It says here, contains extra footage not seen in Australian cinemas. Now, this is uncut. All the death scenes are intact on this, but on the DVD, they're nowhere to be found. I have the Australian DVD, and they didn't even put the full death scenes in. Like, I don't know what happened. I'm sure that they must have released an uncut version. I don't know what, because this is the uncut version. It has all the scenes complete. So I don't know why they haven't released Nightmare 5 completely uncut. I mean, it's not the best in the series, but I'd like to see it in its full glory, you know. The special effects are really cool. But, yeah, it's really strange how this one, you know, never got a DVD release uncut, but it's only on VHS. It seems to me there must be an uncut master somewhere. They couldn't have just thrown it away because this one exists. So that's really strange. But yeah, Nightmare 5, it isn't the best of the series, but it's watchable. It's definitely better than 6. And here I have The Terminator, the VHS one. Now this isn't really a horror film, but it's more of a sci-fi thriller horror. But I guess I threw it in here because it has a cool cover. And this was one of those movies I rented a lot as a kid. I loved the cover of Arnie just there with that gun. And on the back it has the hand-painted picture of Arnie. I always thought that was really cool. And of course, US Magazine, as it says there. Rip-roaring adventure, fast-paced and cleverly conceived, well-made sci-fi thriller. Totally agree. This is a real classic movie. And I love every minute of Terminator. And yeah, on the front here, 4 stars. The Terminator is the perfect science fiction adventure film, Video Times. Can't argue with that. And here I have another rarity, sort of. Fright Night Part 2. Now, this originally came in a coffin-shaped VHS box. I really wish I had that version, but when I got this, this is how it came. Somebody had taken the coffin box apart and just reassembled all of the parts into a normal small clamshell. So yeah, this is a really awesome cover. It's pretty much a recreation of the original, but they obviously just changed the building and there's a light on with 2 people in it, which is really cool. I think it's a really great cover, and this isn't a bad sequel either. I remember seeing this a lot in the video stores, and I remember there was one that did have the coffin box. I always used to think that looked really cool. But yeah, Fright Night Part 2, very underrated sequel. I'd like to see a Blu-ray release of this because, let's face it, it needs it. There was a DVD release of this many years ago, but it's out of print, and there's been bootleg DVDs floating around, and this needs a proper transfer. This needs a proper DVD or Blu-ray because it really is an underrated sequel and far better than any of those crappy remakes they did, you know. Here I have Creepshow, which I think has one of the coolest covers ever. Much like Fright Night, it has that hand-drawn style with the ghostly, you know, figure in the front there. And yeah, I love it. I just like this really old, dodgy-looking cover. It's got a lot of character. And the spine, the highlighted fluorescent Creepshow logo. And on the back, they got like this comic book panel style of all the monsters and stuff. So yeah, I mean, this is a really cool cover and cool movie. The tape, unfortunately, is very beaten up, as you can see. Somebody actually, I think, dissected it because the tape has been opened. Because that happened a lot back then. When tapes were damaged, they would try to repair them at the stores. And this is a very, very old tape. I think it came out in 83, 84. And here I have one of my favorites, because this was a cover that used to creep me out as a kid, but when I look at it now, it's kind of laughable. Blood Diner. First they greet you, then they eat you. I remember when I used to look on the back of the cover, I used to freak out at this imagery right here. The ultimate and killer cuisine. Like you see the brain in the jar, Uncle Anwar's brain. You see one of the brothers or whoever that is eating and testing the soup, the sawing of the skull of a dead guy, and of course some guy biting a chunk out of a woman's arm as well as strangling her. This stuff was nasty, you know, really nasty. I mean, but when I watched it years later, I obviously didn't get to see this as a kid, but the cover used to creep me out. This was from Vestron Video International, by the way. And Vestron were a fairly big distributor for horror in the US in the 80s, and they obviously crossed over here. Blood Diner is more of a comedy horror than it is an actual horror film. There's so many moments where you just laugh, and I think it was intentional. The horror and humor is kind of like Evil Dead and Trauma mixed together. I guess you could call it that. It kind of has a mixture of the humor of Evil Dead and Toxic Avenger, I could say. You know, if this was distributed as a Trauma film, I wouldn't have been surprised though, but it's a little better than that. Here's Food of the Gods Part 2, and I actually haven't watched this yet. I just thought it would be interesting to watch because it was like, I picked up a lot of these tapes about 10 years ago when there was a video store that was closing down. They were just selling off all their VHS stuff for like 50 cents. And this was one of them. I thought it had a cool cover, so I just picked it up, you know. And I haven't seen it yet, but I might give it a watch. It might be good schlocky fun for all I know, but it might be a big piece of shit for all I know. And here I have The Fly 2, which I now have on a special edition DVD, but I still think this cover is pretty cool. I like the idea of the fly and kind of a recreation of the originals cover with the teleportation machine. Like father, like son. A very underrated sequel in my opinion, and I'm surprised this is rated M15+. It says horror and occasional violence and coarse language. This movie's pretty damn gruesome. I would have at least given this an MA rating, or at the time this tape came out, I don't think the MA rating existed, but this should have been R rated because there's a head crushing, people being dissolved. The last 20 to 30 minutes of the movie is really nasty. I mean, look at this. This guy gets his face melted. You know, and it's gruesome. And there's a horrible scene involving this poor dog, you know, that I don't want to talk about. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. It's very hard to watch at times. In a way, this is almost more disturbing than the original. But it obviously isn't as well written or as well acted as the original. But it's not awful. The acting is perfectly fine. It's serviceable. Following the first Fly is a hard act, you know. And taken for what it is, this is just a continuation of the story with gruesome special effects, some really, really decent performances, I think. I mean, Eric Stoltz, Daphne Zuniga, Lee Richardson, everyone in this movie, I think, done a pretty damn good job for what they had. It's definitely worth a watch. It's really enjoyable, but just don't go in thinking that it's going to be as good as the first one, because it isn't. It isn't as good as the first one. But it's not one that should be listed as like one of the worst sequels of all time. That's very unfair because there's a lot of really cool stuff in this movie. So just give this one a chance. If the first one's an A+ movie, this is a B+, I would say. And here I have Alligator 2, The Mutation. I've seen the first Alligator. I have yet to see this one. I liked the first Alligator, oddly enough. It has some problems, but it was better than what I was expecting. And yeah, I just don't know what to say about this one because I haven't seen it. Although I find it funny on some of these reviews. The Chicago Tribune says, the critics loved Alligator. Okay, but not Alligator 2, so I guess they used the review from the first movie because the first movie actually got some decent reviews. More bite than Piranha, more thrills than Jaws, the Daily Press. And People Magazine, a humdinger thriller, whatever the hell that is. You know, eye-popping scares, Newsweek. So, I don't know if these reviews are actually from this movie or they've just put them on there to try and sell it. Some of the actors that are in this, Joseph Bologna from Blame It on Rhea, Women in Red. Dee Wallace Stone, I know her from E.T., Cujo, and among other things. Critters. Woody Brown, The Accused, Holly Gagnier from Baywatch, Brock Peters from Star Trek, and Julian Rise, Predator 2 and Die Hard 2. Wow. Well, they had to try and sell it because they must have known this movie was pretty shit. But I haven't seen it yet, so I can't really comment. Other than this is a PG movie and there's low-level violence, so this might be a step down from the first one, because if it's lightweight compared to the first one, then that's not really much to say. Here I have Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight. Now, I saw this once and I didn't really think much of it, but I might give it another look sometime. I like the cover on this one. Tales from the Crypt was one of those series that I never watched on television. I was about 6 or 7 when the show ended, I think. And I don't even know if it aired on TV. I think it aired very, very late over here in Australia, but I could be wrong. But I would always used to see the videotapes available for rental. They were always available. And this was one of them, of course, Tales from the Crypt, Demon Knight, which was a feature-length movie. But, yeah, it's... from what I remember, it was just average. Maybe I have to watch it again. I haven't seen it for so long. Here I have Road Games with Jamie Lee Curtis. This movie was interesting. I thought it was okay. Jamie Lee Curtis and Stacy Keach do a decent job. And, yeah, I didn't mind this one. But I have to get a Blu-ray or a DVD of it because the video quality isn't the best. And here I have The Video Dead. I love the cover on this, and I think that's the best thing I can say about it. The living dead are here and they're lusting for blood. Yours. Thought that was pretty cool, but unfortunately this movie really isn't that great. This cover I think is the best thing about it, and I think it does have an interchangeable cover. Let me just check here. Premiere Entertainment used to do this a lot. Yeah, there was. Somebody actually ripped out the image from the cover. I wonder what that was. So there's two, there's two covers that you can flip over. I prefer this one. This one, I don't know. I mean, it's missing, so I can't really say much. But I do like the idea of the TV at the bleeding. That's pretty cool. But yeah, that's pretty much it. The Video Dead. I have to watch this because I really haven't seen it. Last but not least, Night of the Demons. Now, this was a movie that I used to always want to watch as a kid. I was too young to watch it, so I never got to, but I always wanted to watch it. I don't know what it was. It was either the title of the movie or the cover. That demon always used to freak me out. Now, this isn't the best cover of Night of the Demons. In America, there was this much cooler one, I think, of Angela in a demon form holding up a greeting card saying you've been invited, right? And the tagline was much cooler. I think it said Angela's having a party and Freddy and Jason is who's scared to come. And this one, it just says you're invited to one hell of a party. I'm like, okay, whatever. I think this could have been a cooler cover had they not had that picture of Angela there and maybe just had this with her dancing and a few demons in the background or something. Or they could have just had the US cover, which was far superior. But this isn't awful. It's okay. The title font here is really cool. In fact, they could have really done like a alternate kind of cover, a more minimalistic one with just that big title in the center of the cover with like a coffin or something around it. I don't know. It could have been much more interesting. Kind of like Bram Stoker's Dracula, the Francis Ford Coppola one with the big Dracula logo. They could have had maybe a logo of Angela in stone, and that would have been cool. But no, they opted for this Photoshop job, or however they did it back then. But it's okay. However, if it wasn't for the images on the back of this cover, I probably wouldn't have had much interest. Now, I got to cover up one of the images here because it shows Linnea Quigley's tits, and YouTube's very finicky lately, and I think nudity is the biggest issue they've always had, so I'll keep those covered. So you got Linnea Quigley's tits, which I'm covering because YouTube. And of course you got the face of that chick who looks like it's been run over by a truck. The eyes gouging out, Linnea Quigley gouging out eyes. Linnea Quigley's ass flash and Stooge's ass flash, out of all things they put on there. Of course the dismembered arm grabbing someone's leg, and the chick with the flamethrower, and of course the demons themselves. So all these images on the back of the cover just made me want to see it even more. So if it wasn't the front cover that caught my attention, it was the title of the movie and the font it was in, its R rating, and of course the images in the back. Night of the Demons. It always stuck out in my mind as a kid, and when I finally got to see it, it was good. I had a lot of fun with it, but it wasn't quite as scary as I thought it would have been. I kind of figured that when I got older, I'm like, once you get used to seeing certain stuff, it probably won't shock you as much. I mean, this really isn't like a dead serious horror film either. It's very humorous, so it wasn't quite what I was expecting. The cover art, kind of made it seem like it was more serious and nasty than it was. But I guess with the pictures on the back of Linnea Quigley and, Stooge, maybe it was supposed to be humorous. I think this is a horror comedy, The humor is very much in the style of Evil Dead. And this is the uncut version, by the way. This is the 88-minute version with all the gruesome gore in it, because I know there was 2 cuts of it released in the US, but we got the full uncut version. There was no joke. So yeah, that's my entire horror movie VHS collection, folks. I hope you all enjoyed this video, and happy Halloween to you all. I hope you're having a great one, and take care.